Veronica presents the AI Repertory Theatre's production of Dan Turner, Hollywood Detective, in Part 1 of Drunk, Disorderly, and Dead by Robert Leslie Bellem. Chapter 1.
I don't like drunken dames, even when they're as gorgeous as Rhoda Ashworth was. To me, a swacked she-male is an abomination, and the Ashworth cutie was obviously plastered to the gills. I could tell at the instant I drifted into the Café La Bamba that evening and saw her fastening the glassy glimpse on me. She was sitting at a ringside table with her hubby of 6 months' duration, Walt Ashworth, and as soon as she tabbed me, she caterwauled.
Oh, Dan Turner, the Hollywood Sherlock. Come on over, lover. I want to dance with you. Want to be held in your arms.
A fine business, I said to myself, especially that lover part. Hell, I'd never even considered a pass in her direction. In the first place, she was barely 20. I always tossed that size back in the brook on account of the game laws. Besides, her marriage to my friend Walt Ashworth, studio still photographer, was supposed to be a movie town idol, one of those genuine love matches full of happiness and honeysuckle. Or at least that had been the score until recently. Then apparently something had gone haywire in the Ashworth paradise. Rhoda's present drunkenness in the Café La Bamba was a good sample of it. This made the 5th or 6th time in less than a month that she'd made an unholy show of herself in public, which is downright dynamite for a Jane who plays sweet ingénue roles in the galloping snapshots. Calling me lover in front of her husband and a cabaret full of picture personages was the nastiest faux pas of all, especially when Gordon Maxim was sitting at the very next table where he couldn't help overhearing it. Gordon Maxim was the big cheese of T-Vox Picks, Rhoda's home lot. And to make matters worse, he had Dahlia Mannering with him, the same Dahlia Mannering who wrote a daily Hollywood gossip column syndicated from hell to Hawaii. Dahlia was a lassie who could purvey scandal with both fists when she wanted to.
Want to dance with Turner?
Rhoda Ashworth kept bleeding.
Want him to kiss me?
Then with everybody in the joint staring at her, she added,
I know what'll get him.
Whereupon she started doing a striptease peel out of her blue satin evening gown. Even the orchestra missed a downbeat when that happened. And no damned wonder. In a town full of choice cookies, Rhoda was the sugar frosting on the cake. She had coppery red hair cut in a page boy bob, the lower waves waterfalling around throat and shoulders of snowy delight. Her glims were a peculiar violet color made darker now by the excited dilation of the pupils. Her kisser was a ripe red blossom, and she was built like the illustration on a bachelor's calendar. I've pasted the optic on many a cinema sweetie in my day, but this Ashworth dish topped them all. Her gams were long and slender, her thighs were sleek columns under clinging satin, and her lifting hips melted into a wasp-thin waistline that didn't require corsetry. From that point on, the scenery became even more spectacular. Right now she was worrying her shoulder straps down her arms. In another instant there would be plenty on full display. Screechy enough her groom wasn't doing a damn thing about it. He just sat there pouring the last slug out of a private rye bottle. He must have been fried to the hat, I thought. Otherwise, he'd have made some move to stop the show Rhoda was furnishing. With his fish-belly face and lusterless lamps, he looked like a fugitive from his own funeral. I hastened my pace, made for his table. That was when Tim Sullivan, the La Bamba head waiter, appeared out of nowhere and put the grab on the Ashworth babe. He yanked her costume back where it belonged, tried to whisper some sense into her ear. Maybe he figured he still meant something to her. She had been a cigarette girl in the joint prior to being discovered by a T-Vox talent scout, and Sullivan had had a crush on her. But evidently he didn't drag much weight now. She kicked at his shins, jerked away from him, and yeeped,
Get your Irish paws off me! Those days are gone forever.
At that juncture, I barged up. Sullivan handed me a harassed look and lammed. Hi, folks. Nice evening. Did I hear myself being paged?
You did.
Walt Ashworth nodded glumly, downed his shot.
Definitely.
Rhoda opened her arms.
Dance with me, Dan. Dance with me.
Well, what the hell? The music was languorous, the night was young, and the Ashworth chicken felt damn nice in my embrace. Moreover, she'd already created a big enough scene. If I refused her invitation, she might have stirred up a juicier stink. So I whirled her out across the polished floor. She did surprisingly well for a wren with a snootful, and the way she pressed herself close to me would have got us both tossed neck over tin cup out of a lower-toned dive. She welded her body to mine until I could practically feel the circulation coursing through her veins. Her skin was the color and texture of heavy cream, her hair was faintly scented, and her soft breathing warmed my front. My temperature commenced to bound toward the higher brackets. Not so ardent, sweet stuff. You'll manufacture a scandal. Not to mention the wear and tear on me.
I want a scandal.
Her voice wasn't the least bit bleary. That didn't add up to make sense. Look, you're just a kid. You're still damp behind the ears. You've got a career ahead of you. Gordon Maxim.
Ooey on Gordon Maxim.
I didn't like to hear her talk that way about the T-Vox mogul. He was an inoffensive little bald head with a withered right arm, the result of polio in childhood, and he'd invested copious gestures to make Rhoda a star. Is that a way to show your appreciation?
Don't preach to me, please.
I'll preach, and you'll listen. Once the gossips of Dahlia Mannering's kidney get their hooks in you, they'll rip your rep to shreds. You'll be washed up.
So what?
So quit showing up against me before Walt gets the idea I'm on the make.
Walt isn't even looking. Dan, I want you to take me home.
And run out on him?
Yes, maybe it'll bring him to his senses. I'm not drunk, Dan. I've never been drunk, even when people thought I was. I've been trying to shame Walt into getting a grip on himself. I want him to think that if he goes to hell in a handbasket, I'll go right along with him, even if it smashes my career.
Oh, a reform act, eh? She nodded.
Because I love him so terribly much.
And how come he needs reformation?
I found out he's on the needle.
Chapter 2. Gone for a Ride.
That was news to me. It hit me like a bash in the teeth. So Walt Ashworth had taken to the luscious Mannering frill, and they both faded out of the picture. Rhoda lurched a little, grabbed at my arm for support.
No, want to go with Dan. Wanted to take care of me.
Her alcoholic histrionics were damned convincing. Walt Ashworth favored me with a sour grin.
Go right ahead.
He said with politely drunken gravity.
Take care of her. Don't mind me.
I slipped an arm around Rhoda Ashworth's slender waist, steered her toward the exit. She stumbled as she crawled into my jalopy out on the parking lot. I had to hold her, or she'd have taken a nosedive against the instrument panel. You can cancel the inebriety act now, hun. We haven't got an audience here. She snagged against me when I slid under the wheel and kicked the starter.
It's not an act now. Funny, but I really am crocked. And I'm so unhappy.
Tears were in her glims. Her mouth trembled forlornly. I couldn't resist stroking her shoulder to soothe her. And when I did that, she melted into my arms like a kid scared of the dark.
Oh, Dan.
I kissed her, not on the lips, but on the forehead. Even the yielding of soft curves upon my shirt front failed to touch off my fuses. She was just a youngster in love and in trouble. A guy would be a heel to take advantage of a situation like that. Never mind, sweetness. Everything will turn out all right.
But when I think of Walt using morphine...
We'll straighten him out. If you can't do it by making him jealous or shame him by pretending to go on public benders, we'll find another way.
I'm not pretending about the bender. This time.
I aimed my coupe out Sunset, headed for her stash down at Malibu. That last snort must have tagged you off third base. I reached past her to crank down the window on her side. My elbow brushed swelling firmness where her gown dipped low. It was mighty nice, but it was also hands-off territory as far as I was concerned. Besides, I was uneasy. When we started winding through the hills and canyons beyond Beverly, the fresh air didn't seem to help her a damned bit. She swayed around as if all her bones had turned to sponge rubber. Her head lolled, her peepers were closed, and she was breathing stertorously. Passed out. Hey, what the hell? A big black limousine without headlights was crowding me over to the side of the deserted highway. It had overtaken my chariot with hissing silence. Now it was cutting athwart my bows like a sinister shadow. I jammed down on my brake pedal, twisted the wheel. Rubber smoked off my tires as I skidded to a stop. I squirmed around, dug a hand under my left armpit where I always carry a shoulder-holstered .32 Roscoe. My move was a split second late. A hulking lug in chauffeur's uniform had already barged out of the limousine's tonneau and planted his oversized brogan on my running board. He had an improvised handkerchief mask over the lower section of his pan and a blue-barreled automatic in his Duke.
Freeze, Snoop, or I'll perforate you like a canceled check.
His voice sounded ugly, menacing. His Roderick looked capable of blasting my teeth into the next township. I froze, as requested.
Get out.
I got out. He kept me covered, reached in and fastened the grab on Rhoda Ashworth. He hauled her toward himself. He was a husky monkey. He put his free arm around her, lifted her like a sack of feathers, and backed toward the limousine. He wasn't alone in his snatch act. His confederate was at the black car's steering wheel, crouched low and muffled by darkness. All I could see was a slender, ring-studded white hand on a chromium wheel spoke. Then I couldn't even tab that much. The masked bozo furnished me with a free ticket to obliteration, slugged me across the noggin with his heater. I wasn't expecting it, didn't have time to duck. The blue steel muzzle kissed me on the cranium, filled my think tank with fireworks. Then the pinwheels and skyrockets and Roman candles were blotted out by thickish billows of fog that drifted into my brain and lulled me to sleep. I couldn't have been unconscious very long, but when I swam out of the anesthetic, the black chariot was gone. So was Rhoda Ashworth. I couldn't even find any tire marks to indicate where the kidnap buggy had been. My head ached to beat hell. There was a lump over my left ear the size of a Georgia watermelon. Outside of that, though, I was all in one piece. Barring a slight wooziness, I seemed to be ticking as usual. Genuflecting to the ancestors who'd bequeathed me my thick skull, I scrambled dizzily into my rambling wreck, sat there for a minute to gather my bashed wits together. I fished out a gasper, set fire to it, sucked the smoke into my bronchial cavities. Then I asked myself who the hell had snatched the Ashworth filly, and why. The answer eluded me. All I knew was that the kidnap car hadn't turned around and headed back toward town. Not at that spot, anyhow. There were no wheel traces on the soft shoulder to mark such a maneuver. Therefore, the snatchers must have continued on toward the ocean. I goosed my cylinders and set forth in the same direction. Hoped against hope that I might run into something. I did, and how. About 3 miles farther along, the spray of my headlamps broomed a highway curve where it snaked through a canyon, reflected momentarily upon a blue and white object reposing inertly on the road's shoulder. The white portions were feminine flesh, the blue was satin evening gown. A dirty premonition crawled up my pants, bit me under the hip pocket. I tossed out my 4-wheel anchors. I was out on the smooth asphalt before my pile of iron had stopped rolling. I catapulted my bulk toward the ditch, whipped out a pencil flashlight and showered its ray on the thing that had caught my eye. I felt my scalp crawling, my innards churning, and my cookies trying to come up. Rhoda Ashworth was sprawled nastily in the sparse underbrush. There was an ugly raw gash on her left shoulder where she'd impacted against the jaggedness of a chunk of rock. Her glims were wide open, staring. Her lower jaw hung loosely agape. I didn't need a second gander to know that she was deader than a last year's Christmas tree.
Chapter 3. Dragnet for Turner.
For an instant, I was too flabbergasted to do anything but stare at her. I could see the marks in the soft earth where the defunct wren had hit and rolled before smacking into that boulder. Now she was grotesquely sprawled, with a blue satin skirt hiked up above her thighs. They'd been damned tasty thighs once, but now they were skinned and rasped by friction contact with the paving. Her stems were askew in laddered chiffon. One shoulder strap of the blue evening gown was broken, the satin bodice ripped to reveal the upper slopes of her breast. It was still a flawless sample of creamy beauty. No blood had welled from the gash above it to mar its milky perfection. I leaned forward, pressed my palm under that firm hillock. I couldn't feel a trace of heartbeat. "The dirty rats," I whispered, thinking about the people in the snatch car. Anybody could see what had happened. Rhoda's form had been tossed out of the black limousine while it was whooshing hellity-blam toward the coast highway. The marks in the earth indicated that she had landed with terrific force, had plowed into the undergrowth and caromed off that jagged rock like a cue ball making a two-cushion bank. And now she was a corpse. She'd play no more heroines for T-Vox. I started to lift her. Then a white beam of light sliced at me. Tires screeched shrilly and metal snarled on paving. I straightened up, pivoted, blinked into the blinding illumination. A voice that sounded like the cop said,
"Hold everything, mister. This thing I've got in my hand is a gun."
He was a motorcycle bull, a county highway hero. He rested his chug bike on its prop and edged toward me, came into the light. He looked hard-boiled. His jaw stuck out like a concrete buttress, and he outweighed me a good 20 pounds.
"What's cooking? Who's this dame?"
"Rhoda Ashworth, the movie star. And nothing's cooking. It's already cooked. The lady is extremely deceased."
"Yeah, so I see. Rhoda Ashworth, huh? What's your name, and why did you croak her?"
I stiffened. Until then, it hadn't dawned on me that my own spot might not smell so appetizing. Maybe that was because I'd still felt a little fuzzy from being maced over the conch by that masked chauffeur. But when the brass-buttoned minion tossed his verbal bombshell at me, I saw I stood a damn good chance of being put in the middle and squeezed. Plenty of people had seen me leaving the Café La Bomba with the Ashworth quail, but there hadn't been any witnesses when she was abducted from my bucket. I could explain until I was green around the adenoids, but would my explanation hold water? "Listen, what makes you think I cooled this morsel?" He told me he wasn't blind.
"Any dope can see the story. You were riding along with her. You went on the make. She put up an argument. You mauled her, tore her dress. Still, she wouldn't listen. So you opened the door on her side, tossed her out. Then you stopped, backed up. You got out to see how much damage you'd done. That's where I came in."
"You're as nutty as a fruitcake, pal. In the first place, the fall didn't croak her. She was dead long before she ever landed in the ditch."
"How come?"
I pointed to the gash on her shoulder. "See any pool of blood, wise guy?"
"No."
"There's your answer. If she'd been alive when she was given the heave-ho, she'd have bled from that gash. But she scarcely leaked a drop of juice. Therefore, she was already meat for the undertaker when she went wafting through space." The highway bull lifted his thick shoulders.
"So, okay, you creamed her before you ditched her. Let's try on these nippers for size."
I was over the well-known barrel. If we'd been inside the city limits, I might have stood a chance. One of my best friends is Lieutenant Dave Donaldson of the LA Homicide Bureau. But out in the county, I generated less than 0 horsepower. The sheriff's division hasn't got too much use for private snoops anyhow. There was only one thing for me to do. I did it. I stretched forth my wrists for the bracelets, let the motorcycle slob snick them on me. Then, while his attention was still on that job, I balled both mollies, brought them rocketing at his plowshare chin in a sizzling twin uppercut. The Turner knuckles collided with the guy's button, and his knees caved under him like boiled noodles. Then he stretched out on the roadside for a nice long snooze. I got his keys, unmanacled myself. My hands freed, I lunged over to Rhoda Ashworth's body, lifted it, and dumped it into my coupe. I crawled under the wheel, souped my carburetor. Driving back toward Hollywood with a dead wren propped against me wasn't my idea of a hilarious evening, but it had to be done. I wanted to know how the Ashworth chicken had met dissolution. My personal future depended on the answer. The obvious solution was that her kidnappers had bumped her, in which case I'd be in a sweet fix, because I couldn't prove she'd been kidnapped out of my chariot before getting the works. The law would try to put the finger on me for the job. I'd find myself languishing in the gow with no chance to hunt for the snatchers who were actually guilty. My sole hope lay in a sneaking hunch that her death hadn't been murder at all. There was a bare possibility Rhoda had passed to her reward via the acute alcoholism route, kicked the bucket in the snatch car from too much joy juice previously imbibed. Her abductors, upon discovering that she was no longer among the living, had thereupon consigned her remainders to the breeze and taken a hurried powder for parts unknown. If this second theory proved correct, I'd be in the clear, even though I couldn't hang an abduction rap on anybody. The mere tossing of her corpse into a convenient ditch wouldn't be regarded as a major crime, no matter who did it, not as long as death itself had been from natural causes. Therefore, it behooved me to get an autopsy performed, and damned soon. It was a county coroner's job, of course, but I wanted to work it through the city police department, where I had some influence. To monkey with any other division would be sticking my neck out, inasmuch as I'd bopped a sheriff's cop. That's why I was blasting my wreck back toward town with a cadaver for company. Once Dave Donaldson got me the findings of a medical examiner, I might be free to make some moves of my own. Mainly, I hankered to catch up with that masked chauffeur. I owed him a swift poke in the mush for the way he'd bludgeoned me. And if I turned him up, I could probably clear myself with the sheriff's office. By now, I was within the purlieus of Hollywood proper. I drove my heap into the basement garage under the apartment shack I call my home, went upstairs to my teepee. Then I phoned headquarters, asked for homicide. Dave Donaldson answered. "Turner talking. Listen, I want you to get a morgue wagon and ferry it post-haste to the garage beneath my stash, by yourself, and keep your blabber buttoned whilst accomplishing same."
That's a hell of a queer request. What's behind it? Delirium tremens?
No, I've got a nice fresh stiff in my jalopy.
You what?
A stiff. Rhoda Ashworth, the T-Vox cutie. And I want her autopsy to get me out from under a bump-off bleat. Donaldson gave issue to a bellowing snort.
So you're the gazabo. By cripes, this takes the fur-trimmed weenie.
Meaning what?
There's a county dragnet out for you, Sherlock. It's on the radio right now. Shortwave, longwave, and God knows what wave. A sheriff's putt-putt gendarme claims that some anonymous gent laid the slugs to him after committing killery on that Ashworth doll. Now every dick in the area is hanging out the eye for a V8 coupe containing the villain and his victim.
I'm the anonymous gent, and my chariot contains the cadaver in question. But it's all a horrible mistake. This is how it happened. I gave him the complete box score, omitting no details. So now you see why I need that autopsy report to jack me out of the grease.
Yeah, I see. I'll be right over. Don't go away.
I told him I wouldn't, and rang off. I ambled over to my cellarette, broached a virgin fifth of VAT 69. I was just tilting a tumblerful down my gullet when somebody rapped on the front door. I opened up. Tim Sullivan, the Café La Bamba headwaiter, waltzed close to me. He had a nickel-plated .22 ladies' gun in his right mitt. He said,
"You stinking louse,"
and pulled the trigger. A bolt of lightning smacked me in the heart. All my wires short-circuited. All my lights went out.
We hope you enjoyed AIRT's production of Dan Turner, Hollywood Detective, in part 1 of Drunk, Disorderly, and Dead. Follow and subscribe to get early access to all of Dan Turner's cases. For even more stories, visit veronicapresents.com. You can help us grow our audience by rating and reviewing this show. Thanks for listening.